Hello everyone, it's Larika here. I'm giving this video a second try because I was halfway through talking and then I realized I didn't press record. So okay, I will repeat and hopefully remember what I said. Anyway, so I'm doing a book tag today. It's called The Hardest Books You've Ever Read. And it's yeah, I was tagged by Daniela from Uncommon Reader. I'll link it below, and I'll also link the person that started the tag originally in the descriptions. I chose four books. These four books that I chose are all South African books. um, yeah, I guess in a way it makes sense because they're books that are written about a time in South Africa around apartheid or just after apartheid. And one is way early when South Africa was still very young. And those are really times that I think, especially during apartheid years, like I was so young, growing up, I was a kid during apartheid. So you have a life that you think you live this life and it's a beautiful life, and I was very blessed. I had a good life, not a rich life, but a good life. And then you grow up, you realize, oh my hell, this was not really a good life. It doesn't change the memories I had as a child of that I had a good life, but you see things through a different light when you realize the things that happened. So when you read books about that, then of course it opens your eyes a little bit more to the reality of your country. So anyway, let me start. The first book I read this year. This is the newest one that I've read, or the latest one, and it was published in paperback in 2026, which is this year in January. It was out on hardcover before, a couple of years maybe, I'm not sure, but it is called Cape Fever by Nadia Davis. And I talked about this book a few videos ago when I talked about what I read this year, or this month. I think it was in January or December, because I got a Scrivener proof copy from a friend of mine. But yeah, this book. It takes place in 1920 in Cape Town. And at that time, so it was just past the First World War, has ended a while back. And the British were in charge of South Africa at that time. And there was also slaves during that time that came from the East, from Asia. And this story is about one of these young women who starts to work for a lady a rich English lady. She's maybe not so rich anymore, that lives in a big house in Cape Town not by herself, and she needed somebody to help clean and cook and whatnot. And this story follows their relationship. And there's no violence per se on the physical side, but the emotional and mental trauma of this book is just... I'm going to link the video of the review because I can't talk about this book again. It's just too hard. I don't know. I think I might read it some point again. I don't know. Because it's really beautifully written. The imagery and the words written by Nadia Davis was just amazing. I can just see Cape Town in those days. But the theme and the topic is so painful that I don't know if I can reread it. But it is literally amazing book. It moved up to a top book that I've read, apart from being one of the hardest books I've read. Then the next book Was written by somebody probably most people will know, J.M. Coetzee. He won the Booker Prize for this book, and he was also a winner later on for the Nobel Prize of Literature. And it's called Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee. And this book, another book that just pulls you like you can't. It takes place at the end of apartheid, has ended now, and this guy called David Lurie, Lurie. He is a professor at a university in Cape Town, romantic poets or something, and he has an affair with a student, and it kind of goes a bit sideways, and then he's accused and he admits it within the university management, but he refuses to go public and admit it in public. So he admits it in private. And so he has to leave the university. And then he goes to the Eastern Cape, where I lived half of my youth. And he moves to a farm there to move in with his daughter on a farm. And things seem to be going okay. And then some horrific thing happens on that farm. Horrific. And then they have to try and deal with this and work through this thing. It's the writing is super beautiful. It's very Nadia Davids' writing with Cape Fever was very. I could feel the atmosphere, the beauty of the space compared to the intensity of this relationship between the owner of the house, Mrs. Hutton, and Soraya, the lady that works for her. You could call her a slave, maybe, but not. She's not officially. So those two things were in like opposition with each other. Whereas with Disgrace, it's just heavy. Like the landscape reflects the harshness of the people that live in that landscape. It's a very, very a very deep book. Of course, there's a lot of politics in it, a lot about the country where it is, about the history, about the people. It's an awesome book, but it is freaking painful. Then next, I have 2 more books, which is non-fiction books. Also South African, like I said. The first one was written by Phumla Gobodo Madikizela. And it's called A Human Being Died That Night, Forgiving Apartheid's Chief Killer. This is how its cover looks. And this book is Apartheid's Chief Killer is Eugene de Kock is his name, and we called him, his nickname was Prime Evil. And he was the head of the death squads during the apartheid era. So a lot of people, of course, died during apartheid. They were killed because of their political beliefs. And I think many people were killed that weren't even into politics. It was just a very violent time. Of course, mainly black people. And so Eugene de Kock was sentenced to 212 years in prison for his involvement or for heading up these death squads. And so this lady Phumla is a psychologist, and she went to visit him in prison and interview him. She started to interview him. She wanted to find out what makes somebody do the things that he did. And is there any possibility of redemption and forgiveness? During the interviews, they build up a relationship, and I think, I wouldn't say she cares for him necessarily, but their relationship changed. And he really talked about things that I can't. He had a certain set of rules for himself, that things that he was not willing to break, and certain rules he wouldn't break. I'm not going to go into that. It's just too hard to talk about. But she just found whatever humanity there was in him. She found it, and I think that is very powerful. If you look at how I made so many notes in this book and underlined and highlighted, because my first novel is called No Flowers on the Graves, that I published years ago. And it is based on apartheid and on some of these characters in it, especially one of the main characters in the book works in this one of these death squads, and that his job is to basically take out people. So so it was very painful to read, because you grow up in a place and you don't even know what things are going on, because of course it was before phones and internet and what is the word I'm looking for when you're not allowed to read certain books? It'll come to me. But anyway, that was so strict. You couldn't just read any paper or any book. It was completely it'll come to me. You couldn't read anything. The radio stations could only play certain music and talk about certain topics. The same with the news. So it was very hidden from us, most of this bad stuff. The last book I want to read about or talk about is a book written by one of my favorite writers. She's a poet, but also a journalist, and her name is Antjie Krog, and she wrote this book, Country of My Skull. So, when apartheid came to an end, we had this thing called the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, TRC, and they investigated the crimes that happened during apartheid. And during that time, people could come and apply for amnesty on both sides, anti-apartheid and apartheid people. And many of them did get amnesty. But they had to sit in a room with a committee, and of course people in the audience that were affected by the activities that these people have done, and basically confess what they have done, and then the committee mostly pardoned them. So this happened in 1996, and I remember the newspapers that came out during that time, because I was still living there in Johannesburg, and it was just the shock of the stuff that was done during that time. It's just quite shocking. So Antjie Krog was one of the journalists that covered it. And the way she wrote about it in this book was really meaningful to me, because she wrote about all the different people or a lot of the people that, the perpetrators, if you want to use that word, I think it's probably best to describe, and the victims. I say victims because I'm also a victim of many crimes in South Africa, but I call myself a survivor. So I don't like using the word victim, but I guess it's victims. And So she wrote about them, she interviewed them, and then she also wrote about the committee, the people on the committee. One of the people was Desmond Tutu, that was almost like, I think, the head of the committee. Amazing man. He won the Peace Prize as well one year. And then also from her perspective and the journalist's perspective, because all these people that covered the TRC, the journalists and the people on the committee, they eventually developed post-traumatic stress disorder, because every day, hour after hour, you hear these horrifying stories that you cannot believe the stuff that went on. So this book covers that time. Very, very hard book to read. I marked as well quite a few spots again in this book, and I used some of this in my novel as well. When I wrote about the TRC close to the end of my novel, I wrote about that, where this main character, Cobus, went to the TRC. So these are my 4 books. It's not as happy as I normally are, but each one of them might have been super difficult to read, but they opened me up to some things that and the reason they had the TRC, it wasn't just to let things, like a catharsis. It wasn't that. It was because it was to open up, people start talking and knowing what happened and start to move on from there, so that we don't do the same things again. That was the point of it. I don't know how successful it was. Maybe there needed to be more follow-up or more discussion once it ended. But I think it's like when something horrifying happens, you don't want to talk about it. You just want to forget about it. And maybe things could have turned out a bit different if we just handled this a little bit differently. But the idea was that once we talk about it, get it out in the open, and we can move on from that. It's never that easy, right? So these are the books, and each one of them really was, it really touched me somehow in a very heavy way, but it also opened my mind to look at the world in a different way, and to face my own prejudices as an Afrikaner of a lot of things that I thought and assumed is right, or the way it is, which wasn't. So this was my thanks, Daniela, for tagging me. I will tag a few people below if you want to do it. It can be a bit hard, but if you want to do it, the hardest books you've read. And yeah, I'm still busy with my story of Scandinavia, which is fascinating. I'm really enjoying it. I'm about maybe close to a third in, just over a quarter. It's a slow read, but I want to read because I want to know what's happening and I want to remember some of it. So it's not a book I'm going to skim through to get over quickly, because then I'm going to forget most of it. So I'm not big with retention of the memory. It has to connect somewhere in my brain with something, and then I'll remember it. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.